Thank you, everyone, for coming to hear our discussion about the intertwined lives of uh, a country and one of its distinguished citizens. As I was reading The Undying Light in preparation for this conversation, I found myself feeling very envious of the podcast Amit Verma, who gives himself 10 or 12 hours to interview his guests, because I don't know how we're going to what we can cover in 45 minutes, that too including time for audience questions. But we'll try to cover as much as we can.
My sincere apologies.
Yeah. But I wanted to start, if I may, Gopalji, with the title of your book, The Undying Light. The last words of the book, this is not a spoiler, are more or less the undying light, slightly paraphrased. And the idea is that India's light is undying. Even so, I finished the book with the feeling that this was a record of what we might call the First Republic of India, and that we were now living in the Second Republic, and that they both called India. There's a continuity of population and certain continuity of culture, but there was a very, very important differences of ethos and institutions. Do you think that's a fair account of the life of the Republic as you saw it?
I think it is. It is a fair description and a fair way of beginning. But I must start by a little apology about this mic business, because I need some assistance when I hear some question which I miss. But I have to say this: being a classroom teacher, I've had terrible visions, imaginings, dreams of my asking my class, "Can you hear me?" and my students saying, "Unfortunately, yes." Truly. But to come back to this foundational question, I must say I had Nehru in mind when this title suggested itself, because Nehru's spontaneous words on the 30th of January were about light. And he said, "The light has gone out of our lives." And he said this in the glare of several cameras on his face at the gate of 30 January Marg. The sun had set, the light literally had gone out, but then the light was back on his face. This comment of his came a little later, but this comment of his and that photograph have got meshed, and that's how it came to my mind when I started this book and I started this title. And he says in his famous speech, which was an extempore speech, "And yet the light will never go out. For thousands of years it will never go out." Was that a pious hope? Was that a wish? I think it was more than that. Keshav.
Nehru leads us on nicely to my next question. There's so many personalities in this book, and we'll come to more of them. I wanted to start though with who I see as the kind of protagonist of almost not the protagonist, but someone who really shines in the first third of the book, and that is your grandfather, not the one whose name you bear, but the other one, the one whom you used to call Anna, Chakravarti Rajgopalachari. And I wonder if you could say a bit about his influence on you, and of course his influence on India.
I could do so, and I would like very much to do so, but I also want to say that this book is not about all the Gs, the Gandhiji, the Panditji, the Rajaji. It's a lot about many others also who deserve to be commemorated and who are part of the light that will not, I believe, die. But yes, Rajaji is terribly crucial to the book and has been to, I think, the founding years of our republic, for the reason that he bore not only no regret, resentment, grievance, or malice about the dying of the previous regime, but looked upon what the British had passed on in terms of administrative governance and values, and said something which is so crucial about our elections. He was to say sometime later that elections and their corruption, these are almost his words, elections and their corruption will make life hell for us, and a time may come when we may look back on the British Raj as an era where good officers gave us good governance and largely free of corruption. I think elections, which are the life breath of democracy, have run headlong into corruption, which has become the life breath of elections. And that septuagenarian, octogenarian, and finally nonagenarian knew a little bit about the great risks of our democracy through the use of money.
And yet, your own differences were also very significant. He was someone who was totally committed to the free market, or not totally committed, but certainly committed, an advocate of the free market. And also, as you document, he could be idiosyncratic and sometimes annoyingly, to your eyes, conservative on questions of gender or caste. But yet you say that you really movingly describe how you were a serving IAS officer, but you were really hoped that his side would win the 72 elections in Tamil Nadu. So is it ultimately this phase in democracy that is more important than your differences with Rajaji?
I would say so. I think the debasement of democracy over the years has been tragic for India, because we have invested so much in democracy. We've invested so much in elections, in the very mechanics of electing our own people to first the Constituent Assembly indirectly, then directly through all the elections that we have had. And it is the debasement of the most important thing that we have, the greatest currency, the coin, the golden coin, the only mint that we have, which is electoral democracy, getting, to use a numismatic phrase, literally degraded.
I'm going to move away in a minute from the G's, as you call them, but I want to stay on them for one last question about Gandhiji and Rajaji together. To me, they represent in the 20th century two most powerful critiques within India of concentration of state power. They were both believers in society rather than an overwhelming centralized state. And Gandhiji, of course, was very skeptical of the state. Rajaji coined the term license permit Raj. And yet, you yourself, not just their grandson, but shaped by them, chose as a young man to dedicate your life to that same central state. So, I was very struck by this paradox reading this book. So could you tell us about, as a young man, what led you in that direction?
I would like the conversation not to have much to do with me, or in fact anything to do with me.
The book, Gopalji, the book, the personal and the personal is in the subtitle of the book. You can't help it.
Well, if you are very keen that I should answer this personal question, I don't know if there are in this very young audience here many people who may like to take a shot at the civil service exams. But if they do, I would strongly suggest I would strongly suggest, whatever be the overall situation today, that they really must. For that is where, the other day I saw on the small screen a simulation of an IAS-IFS interview in which a girl who is going to take a shot at the foreign service exam, is being consciously bullied by somebody to answer questions, and bullied so brutally, but she gave it back. The questioner, who is a retired diplomat, said, "Don't you think we should break up Pakistan into 4 bits?" And she said, "Maybe yes, but I don't think public interview like this is where such a sentiment should be expressed. I thought this person is going to be a fantastic Foreign Service officer because she is speaking her mind, and she's also, I think, telling the bully who is acting a bully's role that even when you are acting a bully's role, there are certain codes and norms in even being a bully. You don't hang, draw, and quarter somebody. You are not meant to be a butcher when you can be just firm and strong and state your point as an Indian nationalist.
Staying on the theme of state versus society, but moving away from Gandhi Rajji, some people say that we're living in a kind of undeclared emergency or something that's reminiscent of the emergency. But in the years leading up to the emergency, you had this amazing people's movement led by Gopalkrishna Gandhi, someone that you knew well. And I wonder if you could tell people who might not have been there, who might not remember then, what those years were like, and also perhaps why we aren't seeing something similar today.
Well, JP, as he was called for the early part of his life, and Lok Nayak in the much later part of his life, was very different from almost every other leader of the freedom struggle, though he was himself a very prominent leader of the freedom struggle, in that he gave his faith and belief to Gandhi, but did not mortgage his intellect to Gandhi. And the same thing applied to Nehru. He gave his camaraderie to Nehru, but said, I have my own brains. And when the height of the 1962 tension, St. Stephen's College, all credit, hats off to St. Stephen's College, invited him to give a lecture on nationalism when China was everybody's mind. He said in the St. Stephen's College Assembly Hall to a very full packed audience, after all, even the Chinese are our brothers. And he said this to a hall which I, at that point, expected to erupt with some kind of murmur of dissent, but no, because the way he was putting it was the way he was putting it, the only way he could put it. And here was a man who had told Nehru, he was as much a socialist as Nehru was. He was in fact much better known among the democratic socialists of Western Europe and the Americas than even Nehru was. He told Nehru that you cannot keep quiet when the Soviet Union runs through Hungary. You cannot do so. And it's because he could say that to Nehru about the Soviet Union and Hungary. He could say what he wanted to very frontally to China about Tibet. Speaking truth to power is now almost a cliched phrase. But I think if there's anyone who did that, it was JP. And it was given to a film star. And I'm very partial to film stars, I must say. Those who may touch a few pages of this book will find that out. Shatrughan Sinha, whose acting I don't know much about, and who's being a member of parliament also I don't know much about, but he said this to me in a conversation. He said to me in a conversation, I just said, you are from Bihar and a great Bihari is my icon, Jayaprakash. He said to me, Aapko malum nahi, I presume a large number of you do know Hindi, but I can translate it also. He said, हम उनके बारे में कहते हैं अंधेरे में एक प्रकाश, जय प्रकाश, जय प्रकाश. So after that for me Shatrughan Sinha was just अंधेरे में एक प्रकाश, जय प्रकाश, जय प्रकाश. He was literally the light in the darkness, which is about being hidebound, which is about being utterly predictable, and which is being about led by the winds of so-called public opinion. Jayaprakash never contested and therefore never won an election in his life. But there were several, who contested and won elections in Jayaprakash's name, and who have very conveniently forgotten that name totally, and who are today not connected with Jayaprakash at all in the public mind.
In the book, you speak about your own decision never to contest an election. Most recently in 2014, when the Aam Aadmi Party wanted you to contest against the now Prime Minister. And you self-deprecatingly say that the reason you never contested is because you are a wimp. But I actually think there's a real parallel here with Jayaprakash, which is that contesting elections involves some degree of inevitable surrender of one's independence of conscience.
Yes, I would say so. Aam Aadmi Party. Aam Aadmi Party is one of the most painful disappointments of our democracy and our republic. For it came like it was almost too good to be true when so many, hundreds of us, including this meaningless character who's speaking to, we all went to this place, Jantar Mantar, and I saw phenomenal magnet that Anna Hazare and Arvind Kejriwal were, only to find, before I left the site, my very large pocket with a very small wallet had been picked. And I said to myself, my God, I should not believe in omens, but this is not good. This is not good for my pocket to be picked at a time when we are all gathering here to talk about honesty. But I don't know what that means. I really don't know what that means. Pickpockets attend very important and good and wholesome and honest gatherings also. But I think that the Aam Aadmi Party didn't really change things. Was it aligned itself to the public distaste for corruption, but I don't think it spoke to the society itself very directly, whereas Jayaprakash did. Jayaprakash is one person who quoted unpopularity. He sort of reveled in quoting unpopularity. In many ways, the only person to have done so.
So you didn't contest elections, but one thing you did do was work closely with two presidents. And one thing your book documents is the change in the role of the president. Because the presidents you worked for were very different from the more recent presidents in terms of their background, their character, and also their influence, which you say that there is such a thing as influence, which is a kind of moral authority. What should the role of the president be?
What would I do with what?
What should the role of the president be in our democracy?
I can speak of two presidents from my personal experience, but I should really speak of the first president, who was very keen to become president, incidentally. He didn't just become president, he was very keen to be the first president of India, having so brilliantly presided over the Constituent Assembly. He made two very important attempts to tell the Prime Minister that the President matters. This was early days. But Nehru was a little rattled because he didn't want the President and the Prime Minister to be seen as being definitionally and by constitutional design antagonistic. And he enlisted the support of the Attorney General and the Solicitor General to give views which coincided with his own views, which were that the President has no power. That's it. The President has no power. And President Rajendra Prasad accepted that, and those two attempts sort of subsided. But President K.R. Narayanan, in an extraordinarily important interview with N. Ram, said something which is profoundly important, and it doesn't fall foul of the Constitution, but it is almost like a golden footnote to a very dull grey page. The page being facts, true, but the golden footnote being part of the slight. He said, the president, and by that one can say he meant governors as well, has no authority, but the president has great influence. The president can influence affairs. But then he added a rider. He said the president's authority, which is non-existent and is there only in the shape of influence, must accord with public opinion when it is right. Two qualifications. Public opinion when it is right, president's thought according to that. This is a very important statement. But here, one must also remember a very interesting episode which happened, the dawn of independence, when the retiring governor of then United Bengal asked Gandhi, who had come to call on him. Gandhi invariably called on governors. He called on collectors also. He was rather particular about that form of courtesy. The governor asked Gandhi, what would you now advise me to do? There is now an elected government. What is that I as governor should do? And Gandhi said to him, Mr. Governor, in a word, nothing. You should do nothing. Power now is with the elected premier, as he was then called. But governors and governors and governors have shown how they can completely squander the opportunity to influence. And if any governor has a desire to shine or to make a name for herself or himself, I must here tell you of a remarkable teaching I got from a simple correspondent in West Bengal whom I never knew. She wrote to me a letter. She didn't intend to school me or to coach me. She was in fact intending to give me a great compliment. She wrote this letter to me saying, Excellency, my respects to the figurehead of the state. I don't think anybody could have interpreted the Constitution better. But there have been presidents, including President Narayanan, who have influenced without transgressing their authority, or the absence of their authority.
One thing you document in the book is the role that you had, or the president has, and that you had as someone working with presidents in deciding the recipients of state honors. And you note with pride your role, for example, in getting Mahadevi Verma a posthumous Padma Vibhushan. But I still wondered, reading about this, why the president should have, or why we need to have these state honors at all. After all, this is a country where the Bharat Ratna, the Prime Minister, the serving Prime Minister himself received it in the second year of the Bharat Ratna. Isn't it sort of aren't they quite a devalued set of honors at this point?
Yes, it does. Of course it has a value. It has a value in the sense in which any decoration has a value. It has a value of setting an example, being an inspiration. But I must say here that there is starting very respectfully from the very first place, I don't think there's been a president who has not wanted a second term. I don't think there's been a vice president who doesn't want to become president. And I don't think there's been a governor who doesn't want to become vice president and president at some point or the other. But there's something called the appropriateness of accepting the limitation of one's role, of one's tenure, and going when the term ends, and going without a backward glance. I don't quite know how many realize that. There one or two persons have done so in our country, but they're as forgotten as the incumbents of those offices would have liked them to be forgotten, like themselves to be forgotten. But I must say, it's very strange. Since, Keshava, you're talking about presidents, if we were to ask any random gathering, name one president of India, they will all without exception name President Abdul Kalam. There's something remarkable about him. Not the first president, not the president who was the first Dalit to become president, not the president who was the first woman to become president, but President Abdul Kalam. I really do not know why and how. I do not really know why and how. I think it has something to do with the fact that he with a name like Abdul Kalam could play the veena. He with a name like Abdul Kalam was vegetarian. And he with a name like Abdul Kalam looked like Abdul Kalam.
I want to move on to something else that you spent almost a decade of your life doing after after taking retirement from the IAS, which was representing India abroad. That is, first as a Minister of Culture, setting up the Nehru Center in London, then 3 ambassadorial stints in Pretoria, in Colombo, and finally in Oslo. That was a very different India in the world. It was an India which was pro-Palestinian, who was friends with South Africa, anti-colonial, and so on and so forth. But my question is, what did those years representing India abroad, what did those years living in foreign countries, and of course you'd previously been in Sri Lanka earlier in your career, what did that teach you about India?
That's a very difficult question. It's a very important question, very difficult question. But I must say, I realized when I was working in those places that India matters hugely and much more than India may realize. And this is not just about India being so big as it is and India being such a great power in contrast to the neighboring countries, but because of this very quality of there being something called a light in India, something called a spirit and a spark about India. I'll only say this. In presenting credentials to President Nelson Mandela, I was literally shivering. It's a presence of history, not just President Mandela, it's a presence of history. And who am I in front of this man who has completely transformed not just South African politics, but transformed the possibility of change from something which was bloody and revolutionary into something which was gracious and which was sublime. How do I had a written speech which I read out, and he had a written speech which he just placed to a side, and then he started by saying, Mr. High Commissioner, you have forgotten an important... I said, I thought my job is lost even before I've entered it. Mr. High Commissioner, you have forgotten important... In the names that you mentioned of the many Indians who have suffered for India and suffered for South Africa and spoken for South Africa, you forgot to mention the name of Muhammad Karim Chagla, who spoke in the United Nations about the evil of apartheid. I had known something about Chagla, I had known also vaguely, but I did not know how important this was in the South African struggle. So Mandela was telling me that plural India, that India which is not just about majority, electoral or otherwise, but plural India with its extraordinarily chiaroscuro character, that India supported the struggle against apartheid. And that India has helped South Africa to be a new rainbow nation. And I can never forget this man who could have left things like national anthems to those who look after details, insisted that the entire anthem, which now under him had Afrikaner and English words, apart from words in the languages of South Africa, native to South Africa, should be sung without any abbreviation. And he was asked by his own colleagues, there's so many Indians. First, South African Chief Justice, Indian origin. First South African Speaker, Indian origin. Half a dozen ministers, Indian origin. Ambassadors of Indian origin in many countries. So he was asked by his own colleagues in the African National Congress, Madiba as he was called, Madiba is a great teacher, why do you have so many Indians in your government, in our government? He said the Indians in our government in South Africa are not proportionate to their population, but they are proportionate to their contribution to the struggle for India's South Africa. That was the India. The India that I had forgotten included Chagla. And then one final word, Keshava, on this. I learned from him something else. We thought, non-violence and ahimsa, they are like Rudraksha malas or Tulsi, and one talks of ahimsa as some kind of a Gangetic given. But in his case, he again in the same speech, he said, Gandhi taught us the importance of disciplined mass protest. Disciplined mass protest. No discipline, mass is useless. No mass, discipline doesn't mean anything. Disciplined mass. So this is what India meant.
There's so many more things I want to ask about, in particular about culture. As we learned in the book, Gopalji had M.S. Subbulakshmi sing Sita Kalyanam at his wedding. Later on, I saw T.M. Krishna sing at your 80th birthday. And there's an amazing moment where he describes retiring from the IAS, and he says that the two jobs he considered taking on his retirement were either a teacher at a Krishnamurti school or an editor at a publishing house. As it happened, he continued to serve India and on the side translated Vikram Seth Suitable Boy into Hindi. That's the kind of person and the kind of life we're talking about. Now, we have very little time, but we could take a couple of questions from the audience. So, who would like to go first?
Entirely optional, no need to ask questions.
I see lots of hands, but sort of whoever the mic gets to, yeah. And please keep your questions brief because there's so many.
Seeing the world seeing the success of China and the model of politics and administration, and all countries in some or the other way moving towards China, is it going to be good for the countries and the world, or at some point these might prove to be bad things for the countries?
Just assume that we are not in Bangalore, but we are in Beijing. Just assume that. Would this question not have a different resonance there? It would. I think another very Indian quality which we must remember is to be able to see any situation from the side of the other party, from the side of the person we are thinking of, not from our own side. There is this famous Latin phrase, audio alteram partem. Just think of it from the other side. Just think of it from the other side. And I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama has never said, is China good for the world? He has said, Tibet and I do not resent China. We want to be in China without threatening China. I think we will be good for China. I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he has no Bharat Ratna, he has no official status. He is truly the greatest jewel that India has today. Kohinoor has gone from India to Europe and England and now rests in the Tower of London. But this jewel has come from the Potala in Tibet and is with us, and we do not know the jewel that is with us. He has no resentment about China. He has regrets, but no resentments. He has pain, but no malice. And he is with us. He is an undying light.
Next question?
Yeah. So first I wanted to ask what is your favorite memory of Gandhiji? And second, what is something that my generation should keep in mind continuing into the future?
Let me just say, my memory of him is of zero importance, because not just because my memory is non-existent, since I was only 2.5 when he died, my memory is of no importance, but what he means to us is of great importance. And I think the only way in which his being of some importance and relevance to us can be learnt is by reading his own words, and especially in his own autobiography. And the one sentence of his which I would like to place before you is this. He says in Hind Swaraj, not a book with which I am in complete agreement, in fact it is a book with which I am in substantial disagreement, but he says in it, we do not know the people in whose name we speak, and the people do not know us who speak in their name. Which really amounts to saying to us that let us not presume to represent India or even a big section of India. India is, friends, at the end of the day, what Menaka Guruswami memorably described it as. India is a majority of minorities. This is not about ethnic minorities. It is not about linguistic minorities, not about religious minorities. It is about the transferability of every minority situation. Each one of us in this gathering can suddenly find herself or himself to be a total minority in terms of lifestyles, in terms of beliefs. Nobody is a majority in India. We are all individual minorities, whether we belong to a community that is religiously a majority or not. We are a majority of minorities. And if we remember that, we can save our democracy from becoming a dictatorship or an oligarchy or a country which does not believe in human decency.
Yeah, next question.
Slightly offbeat question. There's Rajaji and Periyar, right? They're very two different personalities, but they were great friends. Could you comment on that?
Your question itself is a comment on it. They were great friends, and they never hid their differences. And I think the fact that they were friends should be remembered as much as the fact that they differed. And I think we can't say Baba Saheb and Gandhiji were friends, but today they are on the same page in India. They are on the same page which stands for opportunities to be given to those who don't have opportunities, honestly and with a sense of their getting what is their due. Baba Saheb and Gandhiji, like Rajaji and Periyar, belong to two different schools. But in a very strange way, time has a way of stitching the pages at the point of the bindery in the book, which makes the book hold fast. And these persons who belonged to the great golden dawn of India, with all the differences which we should never forget, are today on the same page telling us the greatest of our national symbols of state is our motto, Satyameva Jayate. Satyameva Jayate. And let us not go into the question, what is truth? That can be left to Pilate in the Bible. We may not be in possession of a good definition of what is truth, but ask anyone, what is a lie? We will know what a lie is. The motto fully is Satyameva Jayate Nanritam. It makes it so clear. Truth alone trumps, not untruth. Not, in other words, not lies. So in a time when we are on the cusp of artificial intelligence versus organic wisdom, let us remember that these people, Rajaji, Periyar, Baba Saheb, Gandhi, Jayaprakash, they said Nan Ritam, not lies. I think these two words, not lies, which are not in the motto, but they are in the shadow of the motto. Being part of the original is what we should remember, not lies.
You have time for one more? Yeah, one final question.
Yes, so since there was some discussion earlier regarding governance.
So you could just move a little bit this way so we can see you.
No, that's
You're being obscured by the tree.
governance.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, so since there was some discussion earlier regarding governance structures and the role of the president, so I was just curious to get your views regarding, do you feel like, say, a presidential form of government, how would that be a better way to have more accountability in a democratic government, because the executive is then sort of separate from the legislature rather than being dependent on it? Because in our current system, I feel we can either have a very strong PM or a very weak PM.
I think what India needs is not presidential form of government or a proportional representation form of government or a continuance of what we have today. What India needs is a government that is open to criticism, and critics who are open to self-criticism, equally important. Critics who are open to self-criticism. Critics who say, I will criticize, but I should also be criticized. But if critics have the arrogance that makes them think they are messiahs, then government will have the corresponding arrogance to say they are above criticism. So what is important is not this or that form of government, but the spirit of government, but the spirit of democracy.
Thank you, Gopalji. Thank you, everyone. And you'll be signing books. Sure? Yeah?
That also is entirely optional.
But I'm sure that this has given you a sense of all that you can find in the Undying Light, and indeed in all of his other books. So thank you again.